I'm Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake. That title should mean something, right? It took 13 years of relentless work, 3 deployments, and countless hours in windowless ops centers. But to my father, it's little more than a punchline he wheels out. When there's an audience and a microphone, I've led strategic operations, handled high-risk evacuations, and made decisions that saved lives. Yet somehow, to him, none of those measures up because I didn't fly jets or charge into combat with boots in the mud. The weight of that somehow often feels heavier than my full-dress uniform. I'm used to the subtle jabs at family dinners, the way he lights up when talking about my brother's helicopter missions, but goes quiet when someone asks about me. I've learned to live with it. Or at least, I thought I had until last Friday night. It was supposed to be a celebration. A Navy appreciation banquet hosted by the local Veterans Council, honoring active duty service members like myself. My name was on the program, second to last speaker before the closing toast. I'd spent a week prepping what I thought would be a respectful, humble reflection on leadership and service. The room was draped in navy blue and gold, with crisp linens on every table and a giant American flag hanging behind the stage. Uniforms gleamed under soft chandeliers, and the scent of polished brass and catered chicken filled the air. A palpable hum of professional respect filled the ballroom, a feeling I cherished. As the MC read my name, I stood, straightened my jacket, and walked to the podium with what I hoped was calm confidence. The applause was respectful, warm even. I gave my speech without a stumble, keeping it brief and centered on teamwork, silent leadership, and what it means to serve behind the scenes. When I finished, I stepped down feeling quietly proud, thinking maybe, just maybe, my dad might finally see me differently. That illusion shattered 30 seconds later. The MC announced him as a surprise celebrity guest. "Let's hear from Colonel Thomas Blake, proud father of our honoree." I froze. My breath hitched, but I kept my smile in place. He strode up as if he were hosting a roast, not a tribute. He opened with a chuckle. When Sarah said she joined the Navy, I figured she'd be folding towels in a medical bay. The crowd gave a polite laugh. My stomach turned, but I didn't flinch. He went on. "Turns out, she's great with spreadsheets. She files paperwork like a champ. If there were medals for stapling, she'd have 3. People laughed louder this time. I scanned the room. A few chuckled uncomfortably. Others avoided eye contact. I sat stone still, hands clenched in my lap, willing my face to stay neutral. My ears burned. My throat tightened. The polished table linen felt rough beneath my white-gloved hands. He kept going, tossing out lines that painted my career as a joke, a clerical role dressed in uniform. He ended with a grin. "But hey, at least she didn't crash anything. That one really landed." The crowd erupted. I smiled weakly, nodding like I was in on the joke, but inside, I was unraveling. All the years I'd worked to be taken seriously, all the moments I'd swallowed disappointment and kept pushing it all, came undone in that moment. In front of my peers, my mentors, and strangers, my father reduced my service to office work. Not just that. He made it a punchline. And they laughed. I grew up in a house where the sound of boots on hardwood meant respect. My father, Colonel Thomas Blake, was the kind of man who never had to raise his voice. His medals did the talking. Discipline was expected. Weakness wasn't acknowledged. And in that world, being a daughter instead of a son already set the stage. My brother Jake was the golden child from day one. Tall, athletic, loud in the way that filled every room. He followed Dad into aviation like it was preordained. My dad lit up every time Jake talked about training flights or the adrenaline of maneuvers. But when I said I wanted to join the Navy, he didn't even look up from his paper. He muttered something like, "We'll see how long that lasts." I wasn't trying to outshine anyone. I just wanted to serve. I wanted to matter. I studied harder than anyone in my class, graduated with honors, and chose operations because I liked complexity, strategy, quiet leadership, But it didn't come with dramatic footage or thunderous flyovers, so to him, it didn't count. Even as I climbed ranks, earned the respect of my teams, and handled high-pressure missions without losing composure, I could never seem to reach him. He never came to my commissioning ceremony. Said he had base meetings. I remember the empty seat where he should have been, a cold, empty space I tried not to look at. When I was deployed for 8 months straight in a support role that coordinated dozens of humanitarian ops, he joked that I probably just pushed a lot of pens. I used to think maybe I was imagining it. Maybe he was just old school and didn't know how to show pride. But then I'd hear how he talked about Jake to the neighbors. My boy flies Black Hawks. Real steel. Meanwhile, I was the kid who liked spreadsheets. It's funny how words can land heavier than silence. What hurt more wasn't that he didn't brag about me. It was that he never even asked. He never wanted to know what my days looked like, what pressures I faced, what wins I quietly tucked away. I'd get back from a brutal operation, and the only message waiting would be a forwarded chain email or a weather update for his fishing trip. Still, I kept pushing forward. I didn't enter the Navy for him, but I would have been lying if I said I didn't hope he'd someday notice. Just once, a phone call, a text, something, but it never came. And after a while, I stopped expecting it. When you're raised to believe strength looks a certain way, loud, physical, visible, you start to question your own. My kind of strength didn't look like his. It wasn't about commanding a room. It was about keeping people safe without them ever knowing I was there. He never saw value in that. Not until much later. And by then, some of the damage was already done. No one stood up for me. No one stopped him. I wasn't sure what hurt more, his words or the silence that followed. I told myself to get through the night. Just sit still. Don't react. But I felt something shift inside me. Some thread finally snapped. The laughter was still dying down when a chair scraped loudly near the head table. Admiral Carson stood. His presence alone was enough to hush the room. A seasoned veteran with 4 decades of service. The kind of man who rarely spoke unless it mattered. He didn't smile. He didn't ask permission. He simply walked to the podium, gently took the mic from the MC's hand, and began. "Most of you know Lieutenant Commander Blake by rank," he said, voice steady and low. "But very few of you know what she's actually done." The room quieted to a silence so sharp it hummed. He went on. "During Operation Silver Tide, when communications failed and ground intel collapsed, one officer held the line from the ops center. She rerouted supply chains, coordinated air cover, and orchestrated the evacuation of 72 civilians from a collapsing zone, all while under live cyber attack. There were murmurs. Forks stopped moving. Glasses hovered midair. I saw my immediate supervisor, a stoic captain, visibly lean forward, a look of profound surprise on his face. Even he hadn't known the full extent. The Admiral continued. "The reason the base didn't fall that day, the reason those people are alive, is because Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake didn't panic. She saw through chaos and made decisions in seconds that most people couldn't make in hours." He glanced toward me then. I didn't move. I couldn't. My hands were locked in my lap, and my chest felt like it might cave in. He kept speaking. "Her work was classified. That's why no one here has heard it before. But tonight, I want it known. She is not a paper pusher. She is not a desk jockey. She is a strategic asset to this country, and one of the finest officers I've ever served with." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. A stillness that carried weight. You could hear the breath catch in people's throats. And in that moment, with every eye turned toward me, I didn't feel exposed. I felt seen. For the first time in my career, someone with power had spoken truth out loud. And it changed everything. As Admiral Carson stepped back from the mic, the room didn't respond right away. It was as if people were still processing what they had just heard. Then, almost in perfect sync, the silence shattered. Applause erupted, loud and rising like a wave crashing through the ballroom. People stood. Some clapped slowly, others with both hands like they needed to prove they understood what they had missed. I felt it in my chest first. That ache, that slow release of something I'd held in too long. My eyes scanned the room. Faces that had laughed at my father's jokes now looked at me differently. Curious, respectful, maybe even ashamed. A few nodded toward me. One woman mouthed, "Thank you. I didn't know what to do with that." And then I looked at my dad. He hadn't stood. His hands rested on the table, fingers splayed like he needed to brace himself. His jaw was tight. His eyes were fixed on the stage but unfocused. I'd never seen him that still. That's unclear. The man who always had a response, who never missed a beat, looked completely undone. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to stare him down and say, "See? I told you." But I didn't. I just sat there, letting the noise wash over me, breathing slowly, like I had in every mission debrief that ever tested my patience. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Someone else had said it for me. It wasn't just that the Admiral had spoken, it was that the room had listened, really listened. And in that moment, it felt like years of silence and doubt and invisible effort had finally counted for something. I wasn't the punchline. I wasn't a hidden name behind the scenes. I was Sarah Blake, and they finally saw me. There's a whole version of my career my dad never saw. Not because I was hiding it, but because I knew he wouldn't understand it. Or worse, that he'd hear it and still not care. When your victories don't look like the movies, people tend to overlook them. Mine looked like data feeds, urgent briefings, and cold decisions made in hot rooms, windowless and severe. But how do you explain that kind of leadership to someone who thinks heroism only happens with boots on sand and rifles in hand? How do you make someone like my father see the weight of decisions that no one claps for? I used to call home after big operations, just to hear a voice that wasn't in uniform. But every time, the conversation drifted back to his fishing trips, his golf league, or Jake's new flight assignment. It wasn't hostile. It was just absent. Like I wasn't real unless I was sitting in front of him doing something he recognized as valuable. Sometimes I think about the folder on my laptop labeled Proof. Screenshots of internal emails, copies of citations, and records of missions I ran point on. I've never shown them to anyone, not because I need praise, but because somewhere deep down, I wanted the chance to show him, to say, this mattered, I mattered. There's a difference between being ignored and being invisible. I wasn't trying to win his approval with my career, but I did want to feel like he saw me. That what I was doing wasn't just valid, but worthy. For years, I gave up on that idea. Told myself it didn't matter. But moments like that banquet prove otherwise. You can survive without someone's validation. You can even thrive. But there's a kind of ache that comes from being proud of yourself and having no one you love reflect it. It builds up in quiet ways. A skipped phone call, a story left untold, a dinner where you smile through silence because it's easier than disappointment. He never saw me because he didn't know how to look. And I stopped trying to be seen because I got tired of feeling small. But that didn't mean I wasn't proud. It didn't mean I wasn't doing something that mattered. It just meant I carried all that weight alone. After the banquet, I found him sitting alone on a bench outside the hotel. His tie was loose, jacket folded beside him, hands resting on his knees like he'd aged 10 years in one night. I sat down beside him, not saying a word. The night air was cool, the kind that makes silence feel heavier. We were separated by 2 feet of cold concrete and years of unspoken history. We didn't look at each other, just sat there, both staring out into nothing. He cleared his throat once, like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the shape of the words. He swallowed, looking down at his hands, as if the next 6 words were physical objects he had to push out. Minutes passed. I didn't press. I'd waited years. A few more minutes wouldn't kill me. Finally, he said it. I was wrong. You deserve better. Just like that. No qualifiers. No defense. No nervous laugh to soften it. It landed harder than any lecture or apology I'd imagined. For a moment, I didn't move. I just let the words sit between us, warm and strange, like sunlight after a long storm. I turned to him and nodded. "Thank you," I said. Nothing more. I didn't cry. I didn't tell him how much I needed to hear that. Maybe he already knew. Maybe that was the point. He nodded back, like he understood we weren't going to rewind the past. But maybe, from that point on, we'd start again. We didn't talk much more that night, didn't need to. Sometimes, healing doesn't come loud. It comes in stillness. In 6 quiet words from a man who never knew how to say them. Until now. Honor isn't something you can demand. It's not handed out like a gift or printed on a certificate. It's proven. Day after day. In the choices you make when no one's watching. In sacrifices no one thanks you for. And in staying true to what you believe, even when it goes unnoticed. For years, I thought recognition would fix something. That if I could just get one moment where someone, especially him, said, "You did good," it would make up for everything. But what I've learned is that honor isn't about applause. It's about knowing who you are when the room is silent, and holding that line even when your heart feels like it's breaking. I don't regret my path. I don't regret the quiet roles, the behind-the-scenes decisions, or the moments I stood alone, because I know now those moments shaped me. They taught me to lead without ego, to serve without needing to be seen, and eventually, without even chasing it, the truth found its way into the light. The night my father said those 6 words didn't erase the years that came before. But it mattered. Not because I needed him to validate my life, but because everyone deserves to feel seen by the people they love. Everyone deserves that moment where someone says, "I get it now. I see you." So if you've been carrying something silently, if you've been showing up, giving your best, hoping someone might notice, I want you to hear this. What you do matters. Even if it goes unseen, unheard, or uncelebrated. Your honor is real. You've proven it. And if there's someone in your life right now who's been quietly showing up, doing the hard thing without asking for recognition, tell them. Don't wait for a speech or a spotlight. Just look them in the eye and say what they need to hear. Who in your life needs to hear your respect? Don't wait.